time win on the road. The other Los Angeles team that played yesterday, the LA Rams, traveled to the Indianapolis Colts, Carson Wentz, and they beat the Colts 27-24. And now that 2 weeks are essentially through the books, yes, the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions are playing tonight, but both of those two teams lost their opening games of the year. So the Rams now have joined a group of only 6 other teams, so 7 including them, that have remained undefeated through the first 2 weeks. We got the Raiders, the surprise Raiders. Derek Carr looking great. John Gruden has his team rolling early on in the season, which we've seen multiple times, so I'm not going to overreact to that. The Broncos are still undefeated. The Buccaneers, the Panthers, and then 2 other teams from the Rams' own division, the 49ers and the Seahawks are the only other teams that are undefeated so far through the first 2 weeks. But this is a really big win for the Rams for several reasons. First of all, this was the first game of a huge 4-game stretch for them. At the Colts, versus the Buccaneers next week at home, versus the Cardinals, at the Seattle Seahawks. So this was a 4-game stretch that they could have easily lost 3 of 4, perhaps fell all 4 games. On the flip side, easily capable of winning all 4 of those games. So this was the very first hurdle that they had to overcome. First game of this brief kind of 4-game stretch on the road at Indianapolis, you collect a big-time win. And I think the fact that this team was coming off such an emotional high after you usher in the Matt Stafford era with an emphatic win at home against the Chicago Bears, opening weekend of the NFL season, the first game at SoFi Stadium, you win in a major emphatic fashion. So you're riding this emotional high. And I think that one thing that can kind of shake a team's confidence a little bit is after you come off an emotionally charged win, you have a fall off losing in a close manner on the road. I think that could have potentially shaken their confidence a little bit had they lost this game, even though it wasn't a pretty game, even though they didn't play well, and there would be certainly lots of tape to look at and see improvements. But at the same time, I think that it could have shaken their confidence a little bit had they not been able to prevail. So the fact that they were able to maintain this winning streak, maintain that sense of confidence with Matt Stafford, I think is really important. The second thing is, this is a really talented Colts team. This is a Colts team that I've been extremely high on throughout the offseason. This was a team that I was extremely bullish about, and I'm not going to touch on them too much, but they're loaded defensively, and I think that with the right quarterback, this is an AFC championship caliber type of team, a Super Bowl contending team. Now, it's a lot is still to be said about whether or not Carson Wentz is the guy. It's certainly a dire outlook so far. I'm not going to make any big proclamations about them just yet, but their roster from top to bottom is extremely talented. So this is just a quality win, period, going up against this Colts defense and this really deep and well-coached, disciplined team. That's 2. Number 3 is this is the first time that Matt Stafford has trailed in the fourth quarter with the Rams. And I think that it's great that early on in the season, in the second game of the year, they get to experience some of this adversity, getting a chance to trail with a new quarterback, getting a sense to see him lead them from behind and ultimately prevail with a road win. Because when we think about Matthew Stafford, sure, he was with the Detroit Lions, but the thing about him is he was known for actually coming back and beating teams. He had 29 wins as a quarterback when trailing in the fourth quarter with the Detroit Lions, but all of that was with Detroit. None of that was with the Rams. And so this was the first opportunity for the Rams to be able to entrust Matt Stafford, to put their trust in him and say, go finish this game for us. And there wasn't any sense of doubt. There wasn't any sense of kind of not necessarily intrigue, but more so lack of confidence in his ability to deliver, like sometimes was the case with Jared Goff. If the Rams were trailing the fourth quarter with Jared Goff, sometimes we'd have our question marks. Can he lead us? That was always the question. And so Rams are trailing 21-17 after the botched punt, and he leads them down a beautiful four-play, 70-yard touchdown drive. Then they take the lead 24-21. Colts come back, tied up 24. And with 7:22 left, he leads them down again. 11-play, 5-minute drive to set up the game-winning field goal. So the NFL is so much about the fine details. In fact, the majority of NFL games are separated by 3 points or less. Normally 3 points is all that's needed, is the only margin. So what that comes down to is execution and trust in your players. Trust in your players to be able to execute down the stretch. That's what it comes down to. That's exactly what it comes down to. And now Stafford has 30 wins, which is the most by any starting quarterback since he joined the NFL, since he entered the NFL in 2009 when trailing in the fourth quarter. It's kind of hard. It's kind of unfathomable that Matthew Stafford would be the guy to be holding this type of record, but that is the fact. That's the reality. And the other reality is it was no secret that Sean McVay and the Rams didn't fully embrace Jared Goff the last couple of years. They didn't fully trust him. And you could see how much faith and how much Sean McVay and the Rams have embraced Matthew Stafford. This entire team raves about him. Not that the team had anything negative to say about Jared Goff. I don't want to disparage him or discredit him for the major accomplishments that he had with the Rams, because it's still early. He did lead them to a Super Bowl, but you can see how much this team really enjoys playing with Matt Stafford, how many more plays they can run. And then fourth is, listen, this is an auspicious start. This is a great start for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations. And when you think about a lot of the teams that have won, the majority of the teams that have won the Super Bowl, obviously the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were a little bit of an exception and an anomaly last year. But normally the teams that are winning the Super Bowl, at least competing for Super Bowls, they're the teams that are able to pull out these narrow victories. These are the teams that are able to prevail, are able to triumph in close games, just able to execute a little bit better, get a little bit of a fortuitous call or a fortunate play, something goes their way, and that's typically what puts them over the edge. They just have a little bit more of good fortune on their side during the season. And, the Rams didn't play particularly well. It wasn't a great game, but they made enough plays when they had to. And that's something that I think is really important that championship caliber teams need to possess, being able to execute down the stretch. Now, obviously, the big test is going to be next week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Defending Super Bowl champs coming to town. That's the true barometer. That's the true measuring stick of where this team is at, and quite frankly, where both of those teams are at, because that is viewed as a potential NFC championship preview between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the LA Rams. So that's going to be a fantastic matchup, and we'll learn a lot more and be able to further assess. In fact, after next week is when I'll reveal my first true top 10 rankings. I wanted to specifically wait till about 3 weeks into the season. I feel like 2 weeks is a little too early. And so another huge test for them coming up, but a quality win to be able to start off this stretch at 2-0. Buys yourself a little bit more wiggle room in case you need to lose a game. That's for the Rams. Now, for the Colts, listen, I'm pretty concerned about the Indianapolis Colts. Not only because Carson Wentz left the game for the final 2 series with an apparent ankle injury. They are currently testing, doing lots of tests right now. They're not sure what the diagnosis is at the moment, but he seemed to have rolled his ankle pretty badly. That's what he said. That's what the coaching staff said. So that's not a good sign for, again, a team that can't afford for him to miss several weeks, especially early on in the season, because their schedule, I just highlighted the Rams schedule. The Colts have probably had the hardest first 5-game slate of any team in the NFL. They opened up at versus Seattle at home, versus the Rams at home. Yes, those were 2 home games, but those are 2 playoff teams from a year ago. And then after that, they've got to go to the Titans. They begin a 3-game road trip to the Titans, who just beat the Seahawks on the road in overtime, 33-30. Then they go to Miami, who, listen, maybe that'll be the one break that they get, given the fact that Tua might not be playing, but the defense is still good. But that's not going to be a walk in the park for them. And then they go at the Ravens, who just beat the Chiefs. So it's not inconceivable that the Colts could start off the year potentially 0-5 and yet still have a chance potentially if they can rattle off 10 or 11 straight games or 11 of 12. But that's a tall order. So that's really concerning right now if you're the Indianapolis Colts, because they could totally start off the year 0-5. Not going to lie, that could totally happen. Johnny Riff. Wentz is so bad. Oh my goodness. Well, the thing is, it's not that you're completely wrong. I do think there were some things that he did well. I thought there were certain throws that he was making. I do like the way that he plays under Frank Reich. I don't think that it was entirely his fault down the stretch that they lost. It wasn't his fault. Jacob Eason threw a terrible pick. Now, I was happy to see it as a Rams fan. But with that being said, am I totally convinced that Carson Wentz has kind of returned to that MVP style and that MVP level from 2017? I'm not convinced of that either. The jury is still out on him, so I'm not entirely positive about him.